In this video, I'm going to go over your questions you have on serving a 5-day notice in Illinois in 2022. We get a lot of questions, and if you don't do the 5-day notice right, you have to redo it. Or if you filed a lawsuit and you didn't do the 5-day notice correctly, you have to start all over with the 5-day notice and file a new lawsuit. So let's get it done correctly. I've been on ABC, NBC, WBBM News Radio, WCPT. I've been on Facebook Live, the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin, MSNBC, and a host of other radio and TV news outlets. There are 4 issues we need to cover on the 5-day notice. The first one is getting the names correctly on the 5-day notice. So if you have a written lease, somewhat simple, go to the written lease and use exactly the names and how they're spelled on the written lease. Put those on your 5-day and make sure to add "and unknown occupants." So if it's Sally and Jim that are listed on the written lease, you want to put on your 5-day notice Sally, Jim, and unknown occupants. Obviously, you use their full name. If they have a last name, you need to include that. So if you don't have a written lease, you're going to need to use the names that you refer to them. So if you refer to them as Hank and Sue, those are the names you need to use. If it's Hank Smith and Sue Jones, those are the names you put on the 5-day notice. If you have checks from them, they should have the names on the checks, which will help. But if it's Sue that gives you the check and the check says Bertha on it, make sure to do Sue, whatever the last name you use, Bertha, whatever her name's on the check. So just make sure you have everyone's name on there and include "and unknown occupants." So that should handle how to get the names correct on the 5-day. So the next issue we have is, what do we put down in the 5-day for rent? And this is a critical question. We see a lot of mistakes with landlords putting down the wrong number. It can only be rent. Can't be late fees, can't be attorney's fees, cannot be utility fees. Just the rent they owe you. So make sure you only include the rent they owe you for the 5 days. If you end up suing them, you'll be able to sue them for the late fees, the utility fees, the attorney's fees, if the lease allows for that. If your lease is done correctly and it says rent includes late fees and utility fees, then that would be rent under your lease agreement. Also, if your lease says you're entitled to attorney's fees, then at the end, you would be entitled to attorney's fees. If your lease does not say you're entitled to attorney's fees, you cannot sue for attorney's fees for handling the eviction. So make sure you get a good lease and make sure you get this issue done right on your 5-day notice. Okay, the next problem we see is not serving the tenant correctly. Now there's only 3 ways currently that you can serve the tenant correctly, but there's a lot of ways you can do it wrong. So we get calls from landlords that they called up the tenant and they told them they have 5 days to pay. Wrong. That they text messaged the tenant that they have 5 days to pay rent. Wrong. That they emailed the tenant and they have 5 days to pay the rent. Also, not effective. There's only 3 ways to give the 5-day notice to the tenant. The first way and the best way is personally hand it to the tenant, the 5-day notice. Any tenant that lives in the place, that's the best way. Second best way is to serve someone that is 13 years or older that lives in the unit. That's also an effective way to serve your 5-day notice. And the third way is to mail the 5-day registered mail, return receipt, so you get a little green card to show that they've received it. that is also an effective way to serve the 5-day notice. If you do one of those 3 ways, then you can move on to the next step of filing the lawsuit. So the final step we get is, when can I file the lawsuit? Do I file it 6 days after I serve? Not exactly. And that's why we suggest you use our forms for the 5-day. Don't put in a date that they have to make the payment by, or you'll sue them. You just have to put in certain language that it's 5 days to file. And the reason being is the courts have held that if the 5th day falls on a Saturday, a Sunday, or a holiday, that doesn't count as the 5th day. So, for example, if the 5th day falls on Memorial Day, that's not a 5th day. The Tuesday after Memorial Day is your 5th day, and then you can file the lawsuit on Wednesday. So because this might be a little complex, we're going to go into a calendar so you can see an example of how this works. Here's an example with a calendar. We're going to assume you served the 5-day on Monday, which would make Tuesday then the first day of the 5 days. Wednesday would be day 2. Thursday would be day 3. Friday would be day 4. And Saturday would theoretically be day 5. Because it's a Saturday, you have to go to the next business day. So Sunday doesn't count. So Monday would actually be the 5th day for the tenant to pay rent. After Monday at midnight, then you can file the lawsuit. So on Tuesday or any day after that, you can file the lawsuit if the tenant didn't pay the rent amount. Remember, if Monday was a holiday, then the 5th day would be Tuesday, and you could not file the lawsuit until Wednesday. If you like what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so when we have more information about law, you'll get notified. Thanks from everyone at the law firm of Jeffrey M. Jacobson.